Welcome. You've made it through the day. Perhaps you've brushed your teeth, dimmed the lights, and laid your head on the pillow. Or maybe you're still settling in, blanket tugged to your shoulders, breath just beginning to slow, seeking a rhythm. A stillness. Here, in this quiet moment, you're invited to travel, not forward, but backward. Not to the future with its glowing screens and neon cities, but far, far into the past. Not to the tales of kings and battles. Not to the clang of swords or the roar of revolutions. Tonight, we are going somewhere much quieter. Much older. Somewhere real. Somewhere soft. We are going to do the laundry. And not just any laundry. Tonight, you'll hear the forgotten story of how people, men, women, servants, mothers, laborers, and guilds kept their clothing clean. And how, across centuries and continents, in the absence of modern soaps and fragrant cleaners, they found in the most unlikely of substances a powerful ally. Yes, urine. A word that might bring a smile, or perhaps a wince. A detail often left out of textbooks. A practice pushed into the margins of history. But tonight, we welcome it. Because in the world before machines, before bleach, before plastic bottles and laundry pods, people had to be creative. They had to rely on nature, chemistry, patience, and yes, even bodily waste, to survive. In this gentle, winding exploration, we will uncover not just the process, but the people. Their days. Their routines. The hush of early morning chores. The scent of damp linen and smoldering ash. The way sunlight fell on drying garments strung across ropes and branches. So, breathe in. Let your shoulders fall. Let your thoughts drift from to-do lists and screens. And imagine a different world. Imagine a narrow cobbled alley, quiet in the golden hush of dawn. A wooden cart rolls slowly past, pulled by hand, its iron wheels squeaking under weight. The driver stops at each corner, pausing beside a tall jar placed carefully by the doorway. He lifts the lid and pours the contents, amber liquid, pungent and potent, into a larger jug. Then, on to the next. This is not waste. This is currency. This is detergent. In ancient Rome, urine was so valuable to the textile industry that it was taxed. Entire professions revolved around its collection, fermentation, and use. People urinated into jars placed on street corners, and laundries paid for the privilege of gathering this resource. It's strange, isn't it? To think that something so ordinary, so human, held such purpose. And yet, this was the brilliance of the past. Long before the gleaming aisles of supermarkets, long before plastic jugs labeled with fresh linen scent, long before water heaters and dryers, there was only effort. And knowledge. And time. To wash was to labor. To soak, to scrub, to rinse, to wring, to hang, to fold, each step was deliberate. Sometimes communal. Sometimes meditative. And always necessary. Garments were precious. A tunic might be worn every day for months before being washed. A woman's linen underdress passed from season to season, patched and mended with care. When it came time to wash them, it was not a weekly ritual, it was a seasonal campaign. And often, urine played a central role. Imagine yourself stepping into the soft haze of a morning centuries past. The air is cool and carries the mingled scents of clay, wood smoke, and earth. You are not in a palace, nor among the scribes or scholars. You are among the workers, in the quiet hum of daily survival. The streets are narrow, the stone beneath your feet worn smooth by generations before you. You pass a line of homes, modest and clustered close together. From a distance, you hear the faint splash of water, the hollow clink of wood against stone, and soft voices in conversation. These sounds lead you to the washing quarters, not glamorous, but essential. A place of effort, routine, and subtle mastery. As you approach, your senses shift. There is a tang in the air, sharper than smoke, saltier than sweat. It is the acrid scent of stale urine. Harsh, but not unexpected. In this world, it is not waste. It is work. For thousands of years, long before bottled detergents or fragrant soaps, people relied on the humble power of ammonia. Ammonia, a compound found in the breakdown of urea, became a crucial ally in keeping fabrics clean, breaking down oils, loosening dirt, and restoring the texture of well-worn cloth. In ancient Rome, the practice was institutional. Imagine the Falaniki, the public laundry scattered across the city. Large establishments, often employing dozens of workers, where garments from senators to street sellers were cleaned, whitened, and returned for reuse. These laundries were as common as bakeries or bathhouses, and just as important. Inside the Falanica, the air is humid. A stone courtyard opens before you, dotted with shallow troughs built into the ground. The walls are damp with condensation. Garments soak in a frothy mixture of water and fermented urine, collected from the public urinals stationed around the city, brought in by collectors who earned coin by hauling full pots through crowded alleys. Here, fullers, men often clad in short tunics, their legs dark with soaked cloth and their feet bare, step into the troughs and begin the rhythmic treading. The cloth squelches beneath them. Step, press, twist. Step, press, twist. The movement is slow and deliberate, designed not to damage the fabric, but to agitate the mixture deep into the fibers. In some laundries, sulfur vapors are introduced in later stages to whiten garments, particularly togas and linens worn by Roman elites. Garments are brushed with clay and sun-dried to achieve the brightness expected by society's higher ranks. Every step, from soaking to beating, from rinsing to brushing, was a process guided by tradition, skill, and the invisible science of chemistry. Even the emperors taxed urine. The infamous urine tax, vectigal urinae, introduced by Emperor Vespasian in the 1st century CE, was levied on those collecting urine for commercial purposes. When mocked for taxing such a base substance, Vespasian is said to have held a coin to his nose and replied, "Pecunia non olet, money does not stink." Beyond Rome, the practice took root in other corners of the ancient world. In China, though not always focused on urine, laundering involved fermented liquids, plant-based ash, and specific herbal mixtures. The idea remained the same. Through fermentation and agitation, dirt could be lifted from fabric, and cleanliness achieved through chemical knowledge passed down quietly, from mother to daughter, from servant to apprentice. In Mesoamerican cultures, women along the riverside used amole, a soap-like plant containing saponins, to cleanse their clothing. While urine was not widely used there, the tactile labor of washing remained a constant. Picture the steady pace of women kneeling by water, their hands calloused yet precise, lifting and dropping cloth, singing lullabies, or working in quiet thought. But let us return to the use of urine, which flourished particularly in Northern and Western Europe during the Middle Ages and beyond. In medieval towns, the use of urine for laundry had become domesticated. While fullers still operated as professionals in larger towns, many households prepared their own cleaning solutions. A chamber pot's contents were not always emptied into waste ditches. Instead, they were poured into a fermentation jar, often left in a warm, shaded corner of the home or courtyard. After a few days, the liquid would become chamber lye, a term used to describe the ammonia-rich fluid used in cleaning and dyeing. Laundry days, often once every several weeks, were an ordeal requiring the coordination of time, space, water, and energy. Women would heat great vats of water, often with ashes added to produce lye, and soak linens overnight. Urine was added to help cut through the oils and body grime that clung to undergarments and linens. Clothes were soaked, then scrubbed across wooden boards, or thumped rhythmically with paddles carved from beech or ash. In colder climates, where rivers and wells might freeze, indoor laundries were built near hearths, and pots of steaming urine water solution would be stirred with long wooden spoons, the rising vapors strong and unmistakable. Let us pause here. Let us imagine not just the work, but the world around the work. You are sitting beside a wash tub. Your hands are raw from lye and brine. A pale sky hangs above. The cloth you clean is not yours, it belongs to the merchant's wife. But you scrub it with care, because your reputation depends on it. The soap you use is made from rendered animal fat and potash. The cloth is coarse, but familiar beneath your fingers. As the day warms, the scent shifts from sharp and sour to clean and damp. There is satisfaction in the labor. Not joy, perhaps, but meaning. Washing was a form of survival. It was a gesture of self-respect, of piety, of social standing. Clean clothes meant you were civil, responsible, trustworthy. A woman who failed to keep her family's linens clean could be whispered about, judged harshly. And so, despite the difficulty, they scrubbed, boiled, rinsed, wrung, and dried. And the results? When the garments were finally clean, dried in open air, laid flat on sun-warmed stones or hung along simple wooden frames, there was relief. There was a pause in the rhythm of life. There was quiet pride. In Scotland, the fulling of cloth was a communal task, especially in the Highlands. The term walking described the process of pounding wet wool cloth to clean and soften it. Women sat in a circle around a long table or wooden plank, singing walking songs in Gaelic as they beat the fabric in rhythm with their hands and fists. The fabric was soaked in sour liquids, including stale urine, and pounded for hours. The songs kept time and spirit. In Iceland, urine was so prized for cleansing wool and cloth that it was saved year-round in barrels. This urine, called surt vatn, was sometimes stored for months before being used. Wool soaked in it would be thoroughly rid of lanolin and oils, preparing it for dyeing or spinning. In those cold lands, where warm clothing was vital, the quality of the wool mattered, and thus the process of washing was considered essential work. Laundry was not only about garments. It was about wool. About flax. About preparing cloth for spinning and weaving, dyeing and sewing. It was connected to the broader cycle of life, from sheep to tunic, from sweat to scrubbing, from dirt to cleanliness. The tools of this life were simple, but each had a purpose. Flat stones with polished tops, ideal for scrubbing. Paddles with worn handles, that would darken by years of water. Clay pots to store souring urine. Strainers made from reed or hide to catch sediment. Ropes strung between trees, sagging under the weight of damp linens. The faint steam of rinsed wool drifting into cool morning air. Even the language of laundry entered the vernacular. The term fuller's earth refers to the clay used to absorb grease from cloth, often applied after urine soaking. Lye became a catch-all term for any alkaline liquid, from ash water to chamber lye. And buckwashing, a term used for large-scale washing days, came to denote the tiring, multi-day process of cleaning the entire household's linens in one go. And when the washing was done, what came next? Folding. Mending. Whipping the cloth with flat sticks to soften it. Brushing wool with teasel heads to raise the nap. Hanging or pressing clothing with flat stones or irons heated over flame. Every step had its rhythm, its silence, its patience. And when garments were ready, folded and stacked, or returned to customers, they carried not just the scent of air and cloth, but the mark of hours spent in care, in labor, in continuity. As the day ends, you can imagine a quiet courtyard. A woman, exhausted but calm, folds the last of the linens. A fuller wipes his brow and closes the wooden gate of his workshop. The air has shifted. there is still a scent, but it is no longer harsh. It is clean. And so, the rhythm of their lives continues. Let yourself rest for a moment in that rhythm. In the slow repetition. In the gentle humility of hands in water, cloth in motion, and work well done. Soon, we will shift from the daily to the personal. We will meet a figure from history, a fuller, a laundress, or a merchant, whose life was shaped by this essential craft. But for now, just breathe. And hold this simple truth. Even the past was filled with laundry. An ordinary man in an extraordinary city. Let the air grow still again. Let the torchlight dim. Let us now leave behind the riverside, the steaming pots, the wooden paddles, just for a little while, and step into a single life. A quiet life. An invisible life. One that would have passed unnoticed in scrolls or statues. Tonight, we meet a man named Marcus Veturius. He was not a senator. He did not command armies or pen philosophy. He did not sculpt marble or debate in the forum. Marcus washed clothes. And in his small, steady way, he shaped the rhythm of his world. The year is 76 CE. Rome stands proudly at the height of its empire. The Colosseum is under construction. Vespasian sits on the imperial throne, a man of military discipline and practical governance. Rome stretches its fingers across the Mediterranean, from Britannia to Egypt. But on a side street in the working-class district of Subura, a different rhythm pulses, quieter than conquest, but equally unrelenting. The streets here are narrow. Buildings lean inward toward each other like gossiping neighbors. The air carries smells layered in time, roasted meat from a tavern, sweat, smoke from charcoal, the ever-present aroma of sewage and salt. And from one corner building, stone on the bottom floor, wooden beams above, comes a distinct scent, sour, chemical, sharp. This is the Falarnica of Marcus Veturius. Marcus inherited the Falarnica from his father, who had operated it for nearly 20 years. Before that, it belonged to an uncle. In their family, laundry was legacy, not glamorous, not glorious, but enduring. At dawn, Marcus rises. He stretches his legs, sore from yesterday's labor. His tunic smells faintly of lye. He lights a clay lamp with a practiced flick and descends the stairs from his modest sleeping quarters to the workshop below. The Falarnica is quiet in the early hours. 3 large stone basins rest in the floor, each used for different stages of the process. Hooks line the walls. Wooden paddles rest against a bench. And in the corner, capped tightly, is a large clay amphora filled with age-during collected days before from neighborhood pots. Marcus walks barefoot across the damp floor. He opens the amphora just a crack, inhales once, not sharply, but knowingly, and nods. It is ready. By the 3rd hour of the day, the shop is alive. 2 slaves, Gaius and Dama, arrive, carrying baskets of garments from a local tavern. Tunics stained with wine and oil. Linens yellowed with sweat. Cloaks stinking of the amphitheater. Each garment is examined. Marcus makes a mental note of which fabrics can be treated harshly, which must be handled with care. Linen is tough. Wool, delicate. Dyed fabrics are unpredictable. The first soak begins. Garments are submerged into a mixture of warm water and aged urine. The ammonia will break down the oils, release the odors, loosen the grime. Marcus stirs the basin with a wooden pole, pushing fabric deep into the liquid. There is a splash. A smell. A quiet nod from Marcus. All as it should be. While the clothes soak, Gaius begins heating another pot of water. Dharma arranges brushes made from stiff reed. Each knows their task, their rhythm. There is no rush, just repetition. Now comes the most labor-intensive part. The treading. Marcus steps into the basin barefoot. The mixture sloshes. He begins to walk in place, gently pressing the garments beneath his feet. Step and press. Step and press. For minutes at a time. Sometimes an hour. Not stamping, not stomping, just steady, firm pressure. The cloth wraps around his toes. The liquid cools as time passes. The smell thickens in the room, but no one flinches. This is the part no one honors. No one celebrates. But it is here, knees bent, soul stained, sweat forming on the brow, that Marcus performs his craft. This is fooling. After the treading, Marcus pulls the garments out one by one, wrings them tightly, and passes them to Gaius, who places them in a rinse basin. Cold water is poured over them again and again until the scent fades. Finally, the cloths are laid over wooden racks in the courtyard, where wind and sun will do their final work. In the meantime, Marcus prepares the next stage, brushing with fuller's earth, a kind of clay that absorbs lingering oils. He sets out a slab, sprinkles the powder, and begins brushing a senator's toga with slow, circular motions. Each step matters. Each gesture, repeated countless times, contributes to something larger than Marcus himself. To dignity. To cleanliness. To social standing. No one thanks him. But when the toga is returned to its owner, clean and bright, Marcus knows he has preserved a man's reputation. Sometimes, customers arrive. A widow with her late husband's military cloak. A young boy sent by a matron with silk tunics in need of whitening. A gruff gladiator who wants his only shirt washed before the next match. Marcus greets them all the same. Respectful. Quiet. Observant. He doesn't speak much. But he remembers every stain. Every hemline. Every customer who ever tried to delay payment. At the end of the day, he records transactions on a wax tablet. 2 denarii from the vintner. 3 for the magistrate's linens. Half paid by the actress, again. He cleans his tools. Rinses his feet. Eats salted bread with olives and boiled lentils. Nothing more. He sits in the doorway and watches the sky darken over Rome's rooftops. Tomorrow, he will rise again. But Marcus is not just a worker. He is a citizen. A father. A keeper of a dying art. The Phalanica is under pressure. New methods are rising. Some elites prefer imported soaps from Gaul. Others send laundry to country estates. Guilds are forming, and the old family shops are struggling to compete. Still, Marcus endures. Why? Because he believes in the honor of labor. Because every thread cleaned is a thread preserved. Because he knows, deeply, instinctively, that someone must tend to the fabric of daily life, or the empire itself will unravel. He never says it. But when he steps into the basin, bare feet pressing linen into sour water, he feels it in his bones. On some days, Marcus visits the temple of Minerva, patroness of craftspeople. He leaves small offerings, coins, bits of folded cloth, a carved reed brush. He asks for strength. For patience. For continued business. Once a year, during the festival of Quinquatria, he closes the shop and brings Gaius and Dharma to the celebration. They eat bread soaked in honey. They watch actors perform. They laugh, not loudly, but fully. In that moment, away from the basins and brine, they are more than launderers. They are Romans. They are part of something vast and living. Their work, invisible though it may be, upholds the city itself. Marcus will never be remembered by name in marble. But in a museum in Pompeii, there is a fresco showing a Falarnica. A man, barefoot, stands in a basin of liquid, lifting cloth from water with a long pole. His brow is furrowed. His arms strong. He is surrounded by basins, brushes, jars of clay. No one knows his name. But it might have been Marcus. Or someone like him. Someone quiet, patient, methodical. Someone who knew the power of soaking cloth in old urine. Who understood that beauty is born not only in temples or poetry, but in clean fabric, neatly folded. As the years pass, Marcus trains a younger worker, his nephew, Silvanus. He teaches him to gauge the readiness of urine by scent. To feel the tension in fabric when it is too dry. To balance vinegar and lye to preserve colors. To never overtread wool, lest it shrink. To always test for dyes before applying fuller's earth. And Silvanus listens. He learns. The rhythm continues. Marcus grows slower. His joints ache. He spends more time brushing than treading. More time instructing than scrubbing. But he smiles more now. He knows his work will live on. Not in scrolls or coins. But in clean garments. In remembered lessons. In the steady rhythm of hands in water, cloth in motion, and care woven into every fold. And when Marcus is gone, Silvanus continues the shop. The basins are repaired. The tools replaced. The amphora refilled. And life goes on. Urine is still collected. Garments are still soaked. The city still hums. And in every freshly cleaned tunic. In every bright white toga. In every garment returned to its owner, fragrant from sun and wind. There is a memory of Marcus Viturius. The man who washed Rome's clothes. Quietly. Faithfully. Forever. The community, the craft, and the quiet legacy of a Roman fuller. As the moon rises over Rome and the flickering oil lamps are lit one by one along the quiet alleyways, the work inside Marcus's Falarnica has finally ended for the day. But beyond the labor, beyond the suds and stone, lies a deeper world. A world of relationships, rhythms, and rituals that cradle Marcus's life, and the lives of all those like him. Let us linger here a while longer. Let us look more closely at the layers of his world. Not just Marcus the worker, but Marcus the man. Marcus the Roman. Marcus the thread in a living tapestry. The Falarnica was more than a workplace. It was a place of community. Located in a bustling neighborhood, the workshop welcomed more than just customers. Neighbors would stop by to chat, exchange news, or barter for small favors. Local children would peer in curiously, wrinkling their noses at the strong scent of the ammonia, yet fascinated by the workers sloshing through the vats. Marcus greeted each visitor with the same slow nod and soft-spoken manner. Though not a man of many words, his presence was calming, steady, a quality noticed and appreciated by those around him. Next door lived a widow named Livia, who often brought over small loaves of barley bread when she had extra. Her eldest son was a stonemason's apprentice. She would sometimes linger, asking Marcus about the best way to remove grease stains from tunics, or to whiten her family's bed linens. Above the Falarnica lived a physician's apprentice named Tiberius, who often leaned from his balcony with a cup of watered wine, watching Marcus work below. The two rarely spoke, but Marcus once helped him remove dried blood from a surgical robe using fuller's earth and vinegar, and since then, Tiberius had brought him small herbs and crushed myrtle leaves as trade. Across the street, a boy named Paulus ran errands for the entire street, fetching bread, sweeping floors, delivering messages. He was no one's child, exactly, but everyone's ward. Marcus sometimes gave him a few scraps of linen for bandages or something warm to sleep under during the coldest nights. These small exchanges, the quiet kindnesses, the passing glances, the mutual understanding, were the threads that wove Marcus's life to the others around him. No one in that neighborhood would call him remarkable. But if he vanished, they would all feel the emptiness. At times, Marcus would look at his hands. They were rough, darkened with lye and tannin and sun. The creases had long since deepened into permanent ridges. A slight bend in one knuckle from an old burn. A scar from a sharp wooden paddle that split during a cold winter's wash. These were the tools of his trade, more important than any amphora or basin. He would sometimes recall the hands of his father, who trained him with the same techniques he now passed on to Sylvanus. He remembered how his father tested the sharpness of fermented urine by dabbing a cloth to his nose, or how he could feel with just a touch whether wool had been overwrung. A craftsman's hands do not come into the world ready, they are shaped, slowly, by repetition, error, and memory. Marcus's own hands had learned patience. And they, in turn, taught him. Twice a year, Marcus would make the short journey beyond the city walls to the Tiber River. Not for leisure. Not even for laundry. But to collect ashes. From particular trees, ash, olive, and fig, burnt at the outskirts by charcoal makers. These ashes, when boiled in water, became lye, an essential component in whitening garments, particularly those worn by Rome's upper classes. He would carry 2 empty sacks on his back, walk for nearly an hour, and return with arms coated in grey dust. He never spoke much on these journeys. He simply walked, watched the city grow smaller, then larger again, and thanked the gods silently for the steadiness of his feet. The ashes were stored in clay jars beside the urine amphorae. Carefully labelled. Tightly sealed. Another layer in the alchemy of cleanliness. Marcus's shop was not large, but it was organized with precision. One wall held rows of paddles, each shaped differently for beating different fabrics. Rounded for wool, flat for linen, sharp-edged for thicker cloth. Another shelf displayed brushes made from animal hair, reed, and even imported palm fibers from Africa. His most prized possession was a bronze press, used to flatten and crease expensive togas after cleaning. It had belonged to his grandfather and bore an inscription, "Labor ist honor, labor is honor." He polished it once a week, not for customers, but for himself. It reminded him that his work, though often dismissed, was dignified, essential, and even sacred. On rare occasions, Marcus would be invited into a wealthy home. Perhaps a merchant whose purple-dyed garments needed careful handling. Or a senator's wife with embroidered linen imported from Egypt. On these visits, Marcus brought only his cleanest tools and finest brushes. He would wear a freshly laundered tunic, whitened by his own hands, and speak little. In these grand homes, with marble floors and painted walls, Marcus moved like a shadow. Silent. Intent. A man of exactness. But what he noticed, what he always noticed, was the contrast. The silence of their rooms compared to the clatter of his shop. The fine oils perfuming their fabrics compared to the sting of his lye. The ease with which they discarded garments, compared to the care he gave each one. And yet, the cloth was the same. Wool was still wool. Stain still clung. Odor still settled. And so Marcus cleaned them. Not with envy. Not with disdain. But with a quiet reminder to himself, every Roman, rich or poor, wore clothes that needed care. And that care passed through his hands. As Rome changed, so did the neighborhood. New builders arrived, replacing old tenement blocks with fresh facades. Taxes rose. Water from the aqueducts sometimes failed to reach his street. The cost of charcoal increased. Younger men sought faster trades: baking, carting, construction. Fewer wanted to walk barefoot in basins of fermented urine. But Marcus did not resist the change. He simply adjusted. He collected rainwater in jars. He began growing soapwort in the small courtyard behind the shop. He cut costs by repairing his own tools. He found ways to do more with less. Silvanus helped. Now nearly grown, he brought a fresh energy to the shop. He suggested offering special cleaning for wedding garments. He wrote signs advertising their services in clear Latin. He visited the dye market and learned to identify which colors ran and which held fast. And Marcus watched. Quietly. Gratefully. He did not need to lead loudly. He simply guided. With gestures. With careful corrections. With trust. He had become not only a fuller, but a teacher. One winter, an illness swept the street. Not a great plague, not an infamous epidemic, just the kind that comes with wet seasons and poor drainage. The baker's wife died. The washerwoman 2 doors down took ill. And Marcus, for the first time in many years, fell into bed with a fever that clung to his bones for days. During those nights, shivering, silent, he thought not of death, but of unfinished tasks. Orders unfilled. Garments unreturned. Amphorae unsealed. But Silvanus kept the shop running. He followed every routine exactly. He took fewer customers to preserve quality. He woke before dawn and worked past dusk. He returned every coin to its proper drawer. And when Marcus finally rose, wrapped in a thin blanket, he stood at the door of the workshop and saw it all: clean basins, neatly folded stacks, brushed linens, fresh lye. He said nothing, but his eyes held gratitude. And in that moment, he knew his legacy was safe. Marcus lived to an old age, not famous, not wealthy, but remembered. When he passed, a simple inscription was carved onto a modest stone outside the Forlanica. To Marcus Viturius, who kept the cloth of Rome clean. The shop continued for years. Then decades. Later, it passed to another family. Eventually, it became a tenement. The basins filled with earth. The tools disappeared. But beneath layers of dust and rubble, Rome remembered. Centuries later, archaeologists would uncover similar Forlanici in Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Ostia. They found worn treading basins, stained brushes, even amphorae labeled for urine storage. Each artifact whispered the same story: that someone, long ago, labored in silence, cared in stillness, preserved through patience. Marcus was never a hero. He was never written about in scrolls or songs. But he was a part of something vast and enduring. A civilization. A city. A cycle. Each garment he cleaned returned to a body. Each cloak he softened warmed a traveler. Each tunic he whitened gave dignity to its wearer. He lived in the folds of history, quiet, ordinary, essential. And in that way, he is not so different from you. From any of us. We all tread through the basins of our lives. Sometimes barefoot. Sometimes tired. Often unnoticed. But through care, through repetition, through quiet constancy, we leave a mark. Even if it fades like steam. Even if it smells faintly of lye. Even if it's wrapped in cloth. We remain. Like Marcus, washer of Rome. Urine, ash, and the echoes beneath the stone. Now that we've walked with Marcus Viturius through the bustling streets of ancient Rome, and followed his quiet life inside the Falarnica, let us leave the individual behind for a moment. Let us journey into the ground itself. Let us descend below the cobbled streets. Below the ash layers and broken rooftops. Below where time sleeps. Archaeology is a kind of dreaming. It is not loud or dramatic. It is the art of piecing together the ordinary, of lifting something forgotten into gentle light. Tonight, we will explore what has been unearthed. Not legends, not myths, but brushes, vats, faded stains on stone, the remnants of laundry, and more specifically, the strange but steady presence of urine. Let us begin with Pompeii. In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, this city once thrived, its markets humming, its villas filled with art, its streets etched with the wheels of carts and sandals. Then, in 79 CE, ash blanketed everything. Thousands perished. Life stopped. And then, preservation began. When excavators first uncovered the remains of Pompeii's Falarnicae, they were surprised. Not by their existence, laundries were expected, but by their scale. One Falarnica, belonging to a man named Stephanus, was especially grand. Hidden behind a high wall in a quieter street, this Falarnica of Stephanus had 5 sunken basins arranged in a row for foot-treading laundry. Multiple amphorae, some of which contained residue of aged urine. Iron and bronze scrapers. Soapstone brushes. A raised platform for laying out and brushing cloth. A drying garden with wooden racks. It was a palace of washing. A temple of textiles. And it smelled, by all accounts, strong. Even today, archaeologists note traces of ammonia salts embedded in the floor stones. The porous rock beneath the basins is permanently discolored, yellowed and smooth from centuries of repeated soaking. The Falarnica was not hidden away. It wasn't shameful. It was respected. A professional establishment. A trusted service. Its entrance was marked by inscriptions. Its owner paid taxes. Its workers lived in attached quarters. And yet, it is almost never mentioned in textbooks. Why? Because it's mundane. Because it smells. Because it involves bodily waste. But tonight, we choose to linger here. Let us imagine the workers of Stephanus's shop. Their early mornings. Their sore knees. Their lunch breaks, eaten beside vats of yellowing water. Let us imagine the clay jars, lined neatly in a row, each sealed tightly with cork or linen. Let us picture the workers checking each jar, sniffing it, judging whether the ammonia content was strong enough. Let us imagine the sounds. The slosh of fabric. The scrape of brushes. The slap of wet cloth on stone. The distant hum of conversation. And the scent, acrid, yes, but familiar. The scent of function. The scent of effort. These are the ghosts of a city not destroyed, but frozen. Not erased, but preserved. And in that preservation, we find our way in. Now, we leave Italy. Let us drift gently across the Mediterranean. Past islands and olive groves. To the western shores of the Iberian Peninsula. To Lusitania, modern-day Portugal. Here, in the ruins of Coimbriga, archaeologists discovered something unexpected. a large laundry complex with stone channels for water and deep collection basins. Nearby, dozens of clay jugs stained with pale yellow residue. The contents, when analyzed, revealed traces of urea and ammonia, and fragments of cloth fibers. It was clear the jugs had been used to collect and ferment urine. This confirmed what was long suspected, that the Romans had brought their laundering methods to the provinces. That urine laundering wasn't limited to Rome or Pompeii. It was practiced from Britannia to Hispania, from Gaul to Judea. And wherever the Romans went, they built baths, sews, roads, and falaniki. The empire's undercurrent was cleanliness. Not in a modern sense, perhaps, but in the sense of order. In the ritual of washing. In the rhythm of soak, scrub, rinse, repeat. Let us now travel further north, to the misty hills and cold rivers of Britain. In the Roman fort of Vindolanda, just south of Hadrian's Wall, archaeologists found not only sandals, tools, and letters, but scraps of woolen fabric, hardened with mineral salts. Near one of the barracks was a sunken vat, once lined with wood, and a collection of bricks with drainage grooves. Soil analysis revealed elevated levels of alkaline ammonia compounds. And suddenly, a picture emerged. Roman soldiers stationed at the edge of the empire, washing their tunics, their cloaks, using the same techniques practiced in the sunlit cities of the Mediterranean. Even here, in the fog and chill of the north, urine was valued. Even here, the fabric mattered. Even here, someone soaked, scrubbed, and rinsed. Because even legionaries must be clean. But archaeology is not only about objects. It is also about language. Let us pause and look at the words. In Latin, urine used for cleaning was called lotium. It was collected in vessels known as dolia or ursioli. A professional urine collector was called a urinator. And the tax placed on urine? Vectigal urinae. This tax, imposed by Emperor Vespasian, was both practical and symbolic. It was Vespasian who famously said, "Pecunia non olet." Money does not stink. He meant it literally. Urine might be unpleasant, but its use made money. It cleaned the garments of the elite. It kept the wool trade thriving. It served the economy. And so, Rome taxed it. This wasn't shameful. This was wisdom. An understanding that even the lowliest substances had value. A truth still relevant today. Now, let us leave the empire. Let us walk across time. To the Vikings of Iceland. There, in the cold and wind, wool was king. Garments were thick, rough, and made to last. And to prepare them for wear, or for dyeing, or for cleaning, they were soaked in sour water. This water was made by fermenting urine, sometimes for weeks, until the ammonia was strong enough to strip oils from the dense sheep's wool. The Vikings called this process kultavotta. It was not a secret. It was tradition, passed down in sagas, practiced by mothers, wives, and daughters. The sour vats were often kept behind longhouses, covered in wooden lids. When archaeologists studied Viking-era farms, they found soaking pits with darkened earth, high in nitrogen compounds. Nearby, often buried in refuse heaps, were stone weights used to press wool into the sour water. No frescoes. No fanfare. But the wool was clean. And the tradition endured. Further east, in the mountains of Georgia, shepherds continued a similar practice into the 19th century. They would collect urine from their flocks, stored in leather sacks, and use it to soften wool for weaving. This wasn't a Roman import. This wasn't classical science. This was human intuition. People knew, long before chemistry gave them names, that urine transformed fabric, It cleaned. It softened. It prepared. And so, they used it. Not with embarrassment, but with understanding. In rural Scotland, the tradition became known as buckwashing. Here, urine was called chamber lye. Women would collect it daily, ferment it, and pour it over woolen cloths laid on stone slabs. They would beat the fabric rhythmically with wooden mallets, sing songs to keep time, and rinse it in cold, peaty stream water. Scottish ballads from the 17th century make passing reference to the lye launderings and souring the wool. In some villages, entire communal bleaching greens were set aside, open areas where laundered garments were laid out under the sun, after having been washed in chamber lye. Today, many of these greens are gone. But the stone troughs remain. Sunken. Mossy. Half forgotten. And when rain fills them, they shimmer faintly, as if remembering the water once poured with care. Archaeology tells us something strange and beautiful. That across centuries, and across continents, human beings, often without contact, arrived at the same conclusion. That what the body discards, the cloth embraces. That urine, unwanted and overlooked, holds power. Not spiritual. Not symbolic. But chemical. Physical. Useful. And that knowledge passed quietly. Through hands. Through practice. Through stories. It wasn't written in marble. It wasn't shouted in amphitheaters. It was whispered. Folded. Washed. And left behind, in stone, fiber, residue. Today, in modern laboratories, scientists examine ancient cloths pulled from bogs, graves, and middens. They study fiber damage, trace elements, alkaline burn, soap ash, ammonia corrosion. And they say, quietly, yes, this was cleaned. Yes, urine was used. Yes, someone cared. And we, listening now, know a little more than we did before. We know that cleanliness was not invented with machines. That dignity comes from effort. That the fabric of history is not always silk and gold. Sometimes it is wool and lye. Sweat and brine. Urine and sun. And that's enough. So, the next time you pass a museum display, and you see a faded tunic, or a woven sash, or a scrubbed wool cloak, remember this. It may once have soaked in a clay vat, in a shop like Stephanus's, tended by hands like Marcus's, stirred, stepped on, and lifted with care, cleaned by what others threw away. That is history, too. Soft. Invisible. Enduring. Imagine yourself stepping now through the open courtyard of a Roman domus. The tiles under your feet are warm, kissed by sunlight that filters through an atrium above. Water from the household impluvium glistens, still and shallow, and somewhere nearby a bronze fountain gurgles gently. The scent here is not of sweat or lye, but of crushed rose petals, lavender oil, and beeswax polish rubbed into mosaics by unseen hands. This is the world of the elite. And yet, even here, in this place of sculpted marble and embroidered couches, urine has touched the hem of every tunic. In this final segment, we explore the contrasts. The quiet tensions between public cleanliness and private status. Between laboring laundresses and perfumed senators. Between linen that smelled of earth and silk that smelled of civet. The invisible servants. Across empires and centuries, elite homes function not only through grandeur but through service, an intricate, often invisible web of workers who ensured the illusion of effortless beauty. In imperial China, the aristocracy wore embroidered robes of silk so delicate they appeared to float. Yet those robes passed through the hands of workers who used fermented plant ash and diluted animal urine to treat stains. These techniques were preserved through family lines, never written down, but passed from mother to daughter among the peasant caste. They worked near the canals of Hangzhou, hunched in silence, while the garments they touched would one day sway gently in palace breezes. In Mughal India, elite households kept washer castes called dhobis, who worked along the rivers. They did not merely beat clothes against stone, they knew how to treat indigo, how to soften cotton with lime, how to use cow urine for purifying white cloth without dulling the fibers. Their names were never recorded in court documents. But without them, no prince could be princely. The ritual of freshness. For the privileged, cleanliness was ritualized. In early Islamic courts, garments were scented with musk and rose oil. Caliphs changed their robes 3 or 4 times a day, each change accompanied by attendants bearing silver flasks of scented rinse water. These clothes had been processed in back alleys of Cairo or Damascus, where aged urine collected from latrines was stored in shaded jars, fermented, then diluted and filtered through cotton to remove impurities. A paradox formed: the cleaner the robe, the further the wearer was from the process that made it clean. Elite Romans, for instance, never set foot in the Falarnica. Their slaves delivered clothing and returned with it neatly folded. But even the wealthy, if they lived long enough, would eventually know the scent of ammonia, not from laundry, but from chamber pots, from illness, from aging. Cleanliness was temporary. A mask. One that required daily maintenance by others. The grand homes and the laundry corners. Even the grandest estates had a corner for washing. In Versailles, there were outbuildings dedicated solely to laundry. In Edo period Japan, noble households had rear gardens not for tea, but for drying fabric. Screens placed just so to shield silk from bleaching too quickly. In Aztec palaces, laundry was performed by female attendants trained from childhood. They used a mix of urine and saponin-rich yucca root to cleanse imperial cloaks woven from rabbit hair or cotton. The garments would then be dried on smooth stones facing the sun, sprinkled with ground flowers to mask residual odor. The emperor never saw this. He only smelled the flowers. Fashion and frequency. In ancient times, how often one changed clothes was not just about hygiene, it was political. Augustus Caesar, for example, was said to change his tunic daily, and had an entire storeroom for fresh togas. This was not merely vanity. It signaled control, prosperity, and piety. In contrast, a farmer might wash his tunic once per moon cycle. A widow might rinse her shawl only on feast days. Their clothes were worn, patched, and heavy with memory. Yet, for all their frugality, they still washed. Cleanliness was not solely a luxury. It was a need, a quiet rebellion against chaos, against decay. The paradox of prestige. A nobleman in medieval France might wear a cloak perfumed with ambergris, woven with silver thread, and bleached to a gleam with potash and stale urine. He would not know that his garment passed through 6 pairs of hands, from the fuller, to the rinsing girl, to the sun-dryer, to the folder, to the perfumer, and finally the footman who laid it gently upon a marble bench. Cleanliness and status were linked. But status rarely acknowledged its debt to labor. Literary whispers of the washed. Even in literature, the act of laundering is backgrounded, hinted at, but rarely shown. Homer writes of Nausicaa washing garments in the river, a rare moment where a noble woman performs the task herself. But even then, she is accompanied by servants, and the act is romanticized, cleaning as a prelude to courtship. In Shakespeare's plays, laundresses are comic or crude. Their work is never honored, only referenced in jest. But between the lines, there is reality. Someone had to scrub Lady Macbeth's gown. Someone washed Hamlet's mourning clothes. The unsung characters behind every hero's clean sleeve. The scent of memory. Smell is memory's companion. The nobility might remember lavender oil, camphor trunks, or cedar wardrobes. The worker remembered the tang of ash, the sharpness of ferment, the sting of raw hands in cold water. But sometimes, both remembered the same scent, the damp linen on a breeze, the moment garments were lifted from the line, warm and sun-fed. That shared experience, across class, gender, and geography, was rare. But it existed. It is the reason we still bury our faces in clean laundry, still pause when a breeze carries the scent of soap. Even the sacred washed. Priests wore vestments. Monks wore robes. And nuns, in silent cloisters, had days reserved for washing. The ritual of cleanliness was spiritual as well as social. In medieval monasteries, rules dictated how often a monk could change his robe, and how it must be cleaned, sometimes with snow, sometimes with stale urine, sometimes not at all for weeks. In Buddhist temples, robes were washed communally. The urine of animals was used in mountain regions, mixed with herbs, then offered to dry in the sun. Even those who renounced luxury did not renounce cleanliness. Between cloak and skin. Clothing is a second skin. Cleanliness, then, is both outer and inner. For the elite, to wear a clean tunic was to announce power. For the poor, it was to reclaim dignity. The tools differed. The methods varied. But the goal was the same, to touch fabric to water, and say, "This, at least, is mine. This I can renew." Final reflections. Now, let your thoughts drift, softly, like linen on a line. Imagine a chambermaid in Renaissance Venice, laying out a silk chemise still faintly scented with jasmine. She has walked miles to fetch clean water, soaked the garment in a mixture passed down from her grandmother, wrung it, dried it, and pressed it with smooth stones. She lays it on a bed for a lady she'll never speak to. The lady will wear it and never know the name of the one who prepared it. But the garment remembers. The fabric holds memory. And now, so do you. Let this quiet knowledge accompany you into rest. Let it soften your breath. Let it slow your thoughts. Let it remind you that care, though often invisible, is the thread that holds us all. Washing. Rinsing. Drying. Again. And again. And again. The social ritual of collection. In nearly every society where urine was reused, its collection formed a kind of quiet social contract. Whether it was a chamber pot emptied each morning or a shared trough at the edge of a household compound, this daily act of disposal was never purely individual. It was communal. Rhythmic. Understood. In the working-class neighborhoods of 18th-century London, some landlords required tenants to contribute their chamber contents to shared fermentation barrels, later sold to tanners and fullers. The payment was small, but so was the income of the poor. A penny or two per week could mean meat on a Sunday. In rural German towns, farmers often traded ash and straw for preserved urine to treat soil. The barter system kept everyone connected. One household's waste became another's resource. In Naples, historical records from the 17th century refer to yellow carts making morning rounds through alleyways. Families poured the contents of their clay pots into open buckets mounted on wheels, tended by men who would later sell the fluid to clothmakers and leatherworkers. The urine was stirred in deep wooden tanks and left to ferment, then ladled out by the pail to artisans in need. These were not formalized economies. But they were meaningful ones. Quiet ones. Built not on wealth or paperwork, but on need and trust. Waste as witness. Urine, collected and stored, became a kind of witness to everyday life. It held traces of meals, illness, effort, and age. It carried within it the residues of stress, of growth, of exertion. In this way, it served as both tool and testimony. In the cramped cities of early modern Europe, public urinals, often nothing more than stone corners with slight drainage, served both sanitation and industry. Their runoff was channeled not into sewers, but toward workshops. In Paris, beneath the Rue Saint-Honoré, archaeologists found deep waste canals lined with lime, designed not just to carry water, but to capture and concentrate human waste, including urine, for industrial use. The scent, they say, was strong, but the purpose clear. Even the street design carried echoes of this economy. Gender, labor, and the hidden workforce. Who carried the buckets? Who stirred the vats? Who washed the wool, the linen, the skin? Often, it was women. Laundry, dyeing, hide soaking, these were tasks frequently assigned to the women of the household or community. In Japan, ama divers used urine-soaked linen strips to soften seaweed nets. In the Mediterranean, girls were trained to prepare cloth with aged urine long before they could read. In Viking settlements, it was common for older women to manage the urine collection and fermentation process used in making lye soap and treating wool. In England, washerwomen were often paid by the piece. They travelled between homes or villages, carrying buckets on wooden frames, with small scraps of cloth tied around their noses to blunt the smell. This labour was invisible, but essential. And it tells us something intimate and profound. That the backbone of cleanliness, of softness, of hygiene, was often a grandmother, a sister, a daughter. Not named in chronicles, but remembered in the fibers. Uroscopy and diagnosis. From practical uses to symbolic meaning, urine also entered the realm of healing. In medieval Europe and the Islamic Golden Age alike, urine was seen not only as waste but as a map of the body's health. Physicians practiced uroscopy, examining the color, consistency, and smell of urine to determine illness. Clear yellow suggested balance. Milky white might indicate kidney trouble. Red tinges were feared. Foam was watched closely. These ideas were not always accurate, but they were deeply believed. Glass flasks, known as urinals, were commonly illustrated in medical manuscripts. Some physicians carried entire satchels of colored water to demonstrate the potential variations. In some cases, urine was even used as treatment. Texts from 14th century France describe using boys' urine to clean wounds. In India, the Ayurvedic practice of amoroli included consuming one's first morning urine as a ritual act of purification and balance. Today, we might view this with skepticism, but in their time, these were acts of care, of belief, of trust in the body's ability to heal itself. Belief, symbol, and spell work. Beyond the clinic, urine featured in magic and ritual. In Norse traditions, fermented urine, known as blodvatten when mixed with blood, was used in protective charms. Warriors would urinate on weapons before battle, believing it cleansed the blade of bad spirits. In Slavic folklore, a circle of urine poured around a newborn's cradle protected the infant from witches. In Ethiopian Christian practice, urine from oxen was believed to purify garments before baptism. It was sprinkled in diluted form on robes, then dried in sunlight, considered an act of sanctification. In parts of rural China, writings describe using children's urine, collected at dawn and heated, to protect doorways during eclipse festivals, as a way to ward off malign spirits. Whether or not these rituals were effective, they remind us of something central. That every substance, no matter how humble, can hold sacredness if believed in. Waste in the workshop. The role of urine stretched further still. In blacksmithing, urine was used to quench hot iron. The ammonia and salts changed the cooling rate and left the blade or nail slightly more brittle, but sometimes, that was desired. In bookbinding, urine softened pigskin covers. In ink making, it was used to thin gum Arabic solutions. In soap making, it was part of the chemical dance that turned fat into cleanliness. Even in brewing, aged urine occasionally made an appearance, in cleaning casks, or preparing grain. not as an ingredient, but as an invisible helper. A quiet part of the process. A background presence. Essential, but unspoken. The return to earth. In many farming cultures, urine was poured onto compost to wake it up. The nitrogen encouraged microbial activity, warming the heap and speeding decay. In Korea's traditional Nongya farming systems, urine was mixed with ashes and straw, then applied in spring to rice paddies. In Scotland, barley fields were sometimes peed by shepherds as they walked their flocks. In the Andes, irrigation channels redirected communal urine toward the lower terraces of maize, where the poorest families farmed. It was a gift, in its way, a nutrient-rich and practical. The message was clear. Return what you've taken. Feed what you've used. Honor the cycle. Letting go of shame. Modernity brought plumbing. And with it, shame. Urine became private. Embarrassing. Something to flush, to forget, to never discuss. But the past did not share that instinct. It saw waste differently. It saw potential. And perhaps that is the deeper story here, not just of a substance, but of a worldview. A way of seeing even the most unwanted things as useful. Valuable. Worth saving. That is not a dirty thought. It is a wise one. The rhythm of waste. Each morning, the pots were emptied. Each evening, the vats were stirred. Each season, the cloth was soaked again. Each generation passed the knowledge along. This was not frantic labor. It was paced. Predictable. Quiet. There is comfort in that. The same kind of comfort that comes from a well-worn path, a familiar task, a long-practiced ritual. Even something as strange as urine, fermented, aged, and reused, was part of a larger cycle. One of repetition. Of effort. Of care. As the night deepens, let your breath settle with this thought. That waste can carry wisdom. That the most overlooked parts of life can still have meaning. That every generation, in every culture, has known how to use what it had. Urine. Ash. Wind. Time. All of it mattered. All of it was enough. Let this final ripple of history carry you now, not toward excitement, but into stillness. The cloth is clean. The basin is empty. The fire has gone to coals. Sleep well, among the echoes of labor. Sleep gently, beside the rhythm of waste and wisdom. As the candle of the past continues to glow gently, casting long, golden shadows on the fabric of memory, we move now into a broader realm. Having explored urine's daily, domestic, and even sacred uses, let us now lift our gaze, slowly, softly, toward the shared sky above many civilizations. Let us examine how distant societies, unconnected by roads or empire, discovered similar truths. Let us explore how across deserts, rivers, jungles, and ice, the usefulness of waste became a quiet bridge between peoples. Tonight, we journey through global parallels. Not of conquest, but of commonality. Not of power, but of practice. Let us begin where the land meets the thread. In the valleys of the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. In the cradle of early Chinese civilization, along the rich, silty banks of the Yangtze and Yellow rivers, daily life moved in tune with the elements. Agriculture was a sacred rhythm, and every component of the body, and the earth, was understood to be part of a cycle. Urine played a role both humble and respected. In early texts such as the Chimin Yao Shu, a 6th century agricultural manual, fermented human urine is described as a crucial fertilizer, especially for delicate vegetables such as garlic and scallions. The manual describes not only how to collect and store it, but also how to mix it with ash and kitchen waste to create a balanced nutrient flow for soil. In households, chamber pots were kept with care, and urine was not wasted. It was poured onto compost, diluted into watering basins, and used in rinsing tools. In traditional Chinese medicine, it was also observed and interpreted, color, clarity, and scent offering clues to inner balance or disharmony. Though rarely used as a cure, its presence was respected as an echo of the body's internal state. And within Daoist spiritual circles, certain sects believed urine could help purify ceremonial vessels or cleanse a sacred writing surface. The intent was not magical, but symbolic, a belief that even what leaves the body can help prepare the self for sacred reflection. Among the weavers of the Andes. High in the Andean Altiplano, where thin air meets sunlight and stone, communities like the Quechua and Aymara preserved wool with remarkable skill and wisdom. Sheep and alpaca fibers, sheared each spring, were soaked not in soap, but in stale urine, known in Quechua as ura. Wool treated in urine became softer, more receptive to natural dyes from cochineal, archiote, and indigo. The smell was strong, but the results vibrant, reds as deep as bloodroot, blues like high mountain skies. In markets from Cusco to Puno, bundles of yarn carried the quiet legacy of this practice. And in ritual dyeing ceremonies for special garments worn during planting festivals or ancestral offerings, the urine used was sometimes collected at dawn from the most respected elder in the family, believed to carry wisdom in their body's flow. Even in building, urine had a place. Adobe bricks were sometimes cured with animal urine, which slowed the drying process, reducing cracks and creating smoother finishes. In sacred altars, urine was even sprinkled along thresholds, believed to form a spiritual barrier against sickness or drought. These acts were neither crude nor hidden. They were part of the landscape, part of the rhythm of life above the clouds. In the deserts of North Africa. In the sun-bleached Medinas of North Africa, where lime-washed homes line ancient alleys and leather tannery pits steam in the midday heat, the reuse of waste followed ancient logic. Urine was collected in clay jugs from homes in Fez and Marrakesh, and brought to the famed tanneries, vast open-air factories of stone vats and dyed hides. There, as in medieval Europe, it served to clean, soften, and strip animal hides before coloring. But beyond its role in trade, urine was also a domestic tool. Among Amazi, Berber, communities, urine mixed with ash was used to wash floors, especially in winter when water was scarce. Women often stored it in special vessels, shaded and sealed, and applied it with coarse bristled brushes made of palm fiber. Healers used urine too, sometimes as a rinse for scorpion stings, or to cleanse knives used in healing rituals. And in ancient Egyptian medicinal papyri, urine is listed as a mild antiseptic when mixed with honey or milk. From the bustling cities to nomadic tents on the edge of the Sahara, the logic was the same: nothing was discarded without thought. Waste was not waste, but resource. In the ice and silence of the Arctic. Far to the north, among the Inuit, Chuki, and Sami peoples of the Arctic and subarctic, where snow meets sky and water is locked in ice for half the year, urine had a role defined by scarcity. Water was precious. And cleaning, especially in winter, was a luxury. Animal skins used for clothing were rubbed with snow and wiped with cloth soaked in fermented urine, which helped prevent bacterial growth and odor. The chemical reaction, though poorly understood at the time, provided real hygienic benefit. In some traditions, hunters treated their outerwear with aged urine before long journeys, softening the leather and creating a subtle protective barrier against moisture and ice. In Sami culture, reindeer urine was also collected and analyzed. Its color and scent could help herders determine whether animals were stressed, dehydrated, or diseased. Among the Chuki of Siberia, women sometimes cleaned bone tools with aged human urine, using it to dissolve fat and dirt before polishing with sand or seal fur. Even here, in lands of silence and snow, the wisdom remained: use what you have. Trust in what the body provides. Let no effort be lost. On the islands of the Pacific. Across the vast waters of the Pacific, from the volcanic peaks of Hawaii to the coral atolls of Kiribati, human ingenuity shaped life from sea and sky, and even from waste. In many Polynesian cultures, urine was considered a cleanser, not just of the body, but of tools and textiles. In ancient Hawaii, kapa cloth, made from pounded mulberry bark, was softened with a blend of ash and fermented urine, allowing it to take on vibrant dyes from turmeric, hibiscus, and lena. The kapa makers would hang the finished sheets on long wooden frames in the wind, letting the scent fade as the cloth fluttered like sails of memory. In Fiji and Tonga, fish nets were treated with a similar process, using urine to clean plant fibers and prepare them for weeks at sea. Canoe sails, too, were sometimes conditioned with stale urine and coconut oil, providing flexibility and a resistance to salt. And within the most sacred spaces, temples to the ancestors, or ritual gathering grounds known as marae, urine had symbolic use. It was not part of offerings, but of preparation. Tools used to carve sacred wood were sometimes washed in fermented urine, not to purify them spiritually, but to remove resin and oil without dulling the blade. Even in such far-flung islands, separated by thousands of miles of ocean, the rhythms of life, and the reuse of waste, resonated with the same truth: all things returned. All things had a purpose. Along the rivers of West Africa, in the kingdoms of ancient Mali, Songhai, and Yoruba lands, the deep relationship between earth and craft shaped every aspect of life. Weavers and dyers along the Niger River used stale urine in their indigo workshops. Before dyeing, cotton cloth was soaked in a vat known as the heniwuru, a mix of fermented plant ash and human urine left to cure under the hot sun for days. The ammonia helped bond the indigo pigment to the fibers, creating robes so dark they shimmered blue-black in the moonlight. These garments, often reserved for kings, warriors, or griots, oral historians, carried not only beauty, but memory. They whispered of rivers, of labor, of human breath and time. In some Yoruba villages, midwives would gently rinse newborns' umbilical stumps with a dilute solution made from boiled urine and herbs, believed to cleanse and protect. The scent was not pleasant, but the act was careful, done with steady hands and slow song. And among the Ashanti, urine-soaked cloth was used in funerary preparation, believed to soften the fabric wrapped around the dead and ease the soul's passage. These practices were never written down in books, but they were passed through the hands, generation to generation. And so they endured. The Plateau peoples of North America. In the cold, pine-scented landscapes of the Pacific Northwest and inland plateaus of what is now Oregon, Idaho, and British Columbia, indigenous nations like the Nez Perce, Kootenai, and Cayuse lived in close rhythm with the land. Animal hides, especially from deer and elk, were treated with fermented urine and wood ash before being tanned with brain paste, in a method now known as brain tanning. The process was intensive, slow, and deeply physical. Each hide took days to prepare. Urine helped strip hair and soften the pelt. Women, who were often the primary tanners, would collect urine over several days in bark-lined pits, stirring it with river stones and letting it sit beneath birch trees. When the hides were ready, they were smoked over low fires, giving them a rich, golden scent and weather resistance. Even in these silent forests, far from the stone cities of Europe or the riverbanks of Asia, the same principle held true: waste could become wealth, labor could become legacy. Across the deserts of Australia, among the First Nations peoples of Australia, whose knowledge of land stretched tens of thousands of years, urine was not often spoken of directly, but it held meaning nonetheless. In desert regions where water was scarce, animal urine was tracked, not collected. Aboriginal trackers could read the landscape through the scent trails of kangaroo, wallaby, or emu urine, identifying where creatures had passed, stopped, or slept. This knowledge, silent, precise, was passed from father to son, elder to youth, without words. In some central desert communities, urine was used in ceremonial cleaning of tools or artifacts, particularly before burial rituals. The ammonia served not only a physical purpose, but a symbolic one, signaling transition, decay, return. Among the Yolu people of Arnhem Land, oral histories describe using aged animal urine mixed with clay to seal cracks in canoes or bark shelters, resourceful, efficient, and enduring. In these stories, waste was never framed as shameful. It was simply another part of the Earth's offering. The shared thread. As we look across these vast geographies, a quiet truth emerges. Though they did not speak the same language, though they had never seen each other's rivers, though their myths were shaped by different stars, they still understood. They understood that what left the body could serve the body, that nothing need be wasted, that labor, done patiently, could turn the unwanted into the essential. This is not the history we read in school books. It is the history of pots behind doorways, of barrels beneath porches, of cloth stretched across wind-washed fences, of women bending over pails, men tending tools, children watching quietly and learning. It is the history of human survival, of invention, of calm, enduring wisdom. Rituals, gender, and the quiet work of transformation. In every corner of the world, the act of collecting and using urine was rarely discussed in the open. It lived in the background of daily life, in the small, necessary moments of domestic labor. And often, this quiet work belonged to women. Whether it was the washerwomen of medieval Europe gathering chamber pots at dawn, or the indigo dyers of Mali stirring vats in the midday sun, women were often the stewards of transformation. They knew the signs of fermentation. They could smell when the vat was ready. They learned how long to soak cloth, how to scrub it, how to rinse it clean. In China's dying towns, entire families would pass down these secrets, not in books, but in hands. A grandmother would show a granddaughter how to hold the fibers, how to wring out the cloth just enough, not too much. "Let it breathe," she might whisper. The same was true in the tannery compounds of Morocco or the secluded dwellings of Japan's Hidaka region. Where the scent was strong, the work was sacred. To outsiders, the smell might repel. But to the worker, it was a language. Even the role of men in these tasks carried rhythm and ritual. In ancient Rome, fullers, male laundry workers, sang as they stomped garments in vats of urine and water, their songs echoing through the stone streets like chants in a temple. In Viking-age Scandinavia, leatherworkers boiled strips of hide steeped in aged urine to make waterproof boots and pouches for the long sea voyages. It was a craft, an art. And everywhere, the labor was bound by time. Urine was collected at dawn. Vat stirred at midday. Cloth hung before sunset. It was work that required patience, awareness, and a respect for decay. For transformation does not happen in haste. Language, metaphor, and symbolism. Across cultures, language reflects how societies viewed waste. Not as shame, but as cycle. In Latin, the word urina was related to urinare, meaning to dive, perhaps a subtle nod to the act of plunging garments into vats, or of entering the depths of what is unclean to come out transformed. In Arabic, the root bwl, related to ball, meaning urine, appears in classical medical texts as a diagnostic tool. Physicians would examine its color, clarity, scent, believing it reflected the body's internal state. Thus, urine was not just waste, it was information, a mirror of health, a message from within. In Japanese tradition, aged urine used for cleaning or dyeing was often called span, a term distinct from simple pee. It implied a preparation, a substance altered by time and purpose. Even in ancient Hebrew texts, urine appears not with derision, but in context, used for cleaning, mentioned in metaphors, acknowledged as a product of life. These linguistic choices matter. They show us a worldview where bodily outputs were not hidden, but understood. Not exalted, but not despised either. The ethical body, waste and reciprocity. In many ancient philosophies, the body was seen not as a singular unit, but as a temporary part of nature's flow. What the body took in, water, grain, warmth, it would eventually give back. In Taoist medicine, urine was part of the body's yin and yang balance. Its smell, clarity, and temperature were signs of the body's internal equilibrium. Though it wasn't always reused externally, it was studied, read, pondered. In early Buddhist monasteries across India and later Southeast Asia, urine was one of the prerequisites, alongside food, clothing, and shelter. Monks were permitted to use urine as medicine, often boiled with herbs. It was not sacred, but it was practical. A tool of simplicity. And in indigenous North America, the view of the body's waste as a part of the natural cycle meant that nothing was discarded without thought. A deer's bladder might be dried and used as a pouch. Its urine trail, as we've seen, might guide a hunter. Its essence was observed, not discarded. Such philosophies did not draw a hard line between clean and unclean. Rather, they emphasized process, intention, and balance. The seasons of fermentation. Fermentation is an act of patience. Just as wine ages in barrels or miso deepens in clay pots, urine, when left to rest, becomes something else. The ancient artisans understood this. In cold climates, winter fermentation was slow. Cloth had to soak for longer. In warmer lands, such as Egypt or southern India, the process accelerated. Some dyers would bury sealed pots of urine in sand to regulate temperature. Others added ash or lime to stabilize the blend. The timing mattered. Just as a baker watches dough rise, these workers watched their vats evolve. The smell changed. The color shifted. Bubbles appeared and vanished. When the vat was right, they began their work. And when it wasn't, they waited. Such patience shaped the rhythms of life. No one could rush the vat. And so, in waiting, they learned to listen, to time, to scent, to change. Scent and memory. For most modern people, the scent of ammonia or aged urine triggers discomfort. But in the past, scent was part of daily life. It wasn't isolated. It was layered: the tang of fermenting indigo, the smoke of cooking fires, the scent of tanned hides, the sharpness of herbs. And with scent came memory. A woman walking past a vat might remember her mother stirring it years before. A craftsman tightening a hide might recall his father's hands showing him how. The sense of smell is closely tied to memory and emotion. These ancient workers lived in a world rich in scent, a world where even the foul had purpose, and where the act of transformation left a trace not just on the cloth or leather, but in the soul. The alchemy of waste, urine, and the search for transformation. There is a quiet magic in the alchemical mind. Not merely in the transmutation of base metals to gold, but in the deeper belief that nothing in the world is ever truly inert. That everything, every scrap, every waste, every drop, contains within it the seeds of transformation. Nowhere is this idea more paradoxical, more intimate, than in the ancient and medieval fascination with urine. It was, after all, the most human of substances, ordinary, regular, embarrassing. Yet for thousands of years, it beckoned the curious mind with a question both simple and strange. What if this wasn't waste? What if it was a key? Urine as a material of mystery. Long before microscopes and molecules, ancient alchemists catalogued the properties of every substance they could touch, taste, or burn. Earth, air, fire, water, and yes, waste. Urine, they discovered, was complex. Left alone, it changed color. It frothed. It warmed. It cooled. It reacted with heat and metals and light. These behaviors made it worthy of attention. In early Mesopotamian texts, clay tablets suggest the use of yellow water as a step in purifying metals or preparing certain stones. Egyptian alchemists, too, wrote of the water of life as part of their experimentation in tanning, embalming, and cleaning gold leaf. In these contexts, urine was not always named directly. It was given symbolic names: dragon's milk, sun water, or the first stream. But practitioners understood. They knew the power of a substance that aged, fermented, and transmuted on its own, without flame or forge. Salt of the earth, the extraction of ammonia and nitrates. By the Middle Ages, urine had become central to two of the most alchemically significant processes, the creation of ammonia and the extraction of saltpeter. Ammonia, used for cleaning and chemical reactions, was produced through the natural breakdown of urea in aging urine. Alchemists noted that when left in warm conditions, urine released fumes that could cleanse copper and silver. These fumes, pungent and acrid, were captured in stills and glassware, condensed, and sometimes mixed with other minerals to test their responses. Saltpeter, potassium nitrate, critical for both preserving food and producing gunpowder, was often sourced from soil soaked with urine. In the 13th and 14th centuries, European texts described how compost pits of straw, manure, and urine would produce saltpeter crystals after months of fermentation. These were carefully scraped, boiled, and refined. In some German towns, saltpeter men would travel from house to house, offering small coins or favors in exchange for urine-rich chamber pot waste. Their collection routes were so vital that they were granted royal licenses. Thus, the alchemist's gold wasn't always yellow metal, it was the pale crystal scraped from the walls of an outhouse trench. The glassmaker's secret. Urine also found its way into the ancient glass-making process. Renaissance Venetian manuals describe how stale urine was added to mixtures of plant ash and sand. This blend, when heated, lowered the melting point and improved the clarity of the final glass. Why urine? Because it contained soluble salts and nitrogenous compounds that helped flux the mixture, allowing a more even melt at lower temperatures. And it was free, collected from workers, households, or public baths. Some historians speculate that the invention of clear glass in parts of Italy and the Middle East may have been aided by this overlooked ingredient. From waste to window. From body to beauty. Philosophers and the purity of filth. Alchemical writings often spoke in paradox. Solvit coagula. Dissolve and bring together. As above, so below. The hidden reflects the visible. And so urine, despised and yet potent, fit perfectly into their symbolic world. Paracelsus, the 16th century Swiss physician and alchemist, believed that urine held clues to the body's inner workings, especially its invisible salts. He performed complex distillations on human waste, describing how the spirit of the liquid could be separated, purified, and studied. He called this process spagyrics, the separation, purification, and reunification of a substance's parts. In his view, urine was not dirty. It was divine matter waiting to be understood. Similarly, Arabic alchemists during the Islamic Golden Age described urine as an al-ma'd al-awwal, the first water, pure in its essence, despite its foulness. Some Sufi philosophers even saw in it a metaphor for the human soul, flawed in appearance, but filled with hidden potential. The color of kings. One of the strangest and most enduring uses of urine in alchemical history was in the making of aurum patabile, drinkable gold. This preparation, pursued feverishly by European alchemists in the 16th and 17th centuries, was thought to be a universal medicine. Recipes varied wildly, but many involved mixing finely powdered gold with fermented urine, heating it, distilling it, and drinking the resulting fluid. It was believed that the spirit of gold, absorbed into the human body via this yellow elixir, could prolong life, prevent illness, and perhaps even grant immortality. While modern science dismisses these claims, the underlying logic made sense to alchemists. If urine carried waste out of the body, perhaps it could also carry something into the body, something powerful, something radiant. The lab as a temple. In the silence of stone workshops and vaulted monasteries, the alchemists worked. Their benches were lined with flasks and alembics, their hands stained with soot and acid. Their texts were cryptic, often veiled in metaphor. Their materials? Simple. Salt. Lead. Vinegar. Honey. Urine. And their belief? That God, or nature, or the universe, had hidden divine secrets in the humblest of things. So they boiled urine. They caught its vapors. They watched it rot. They prayed over its fumes. And in doing so, they laid the foundation for modern chemistry. Medicine and diagnosis, reading the golden stream. Outside the alchemist's lab, in quieter spaces of domestic and medical practice, urine took on another role, less mystical, more observational, but no less curious. Since ancient times, physicians examined urine to diagnose disease. Known as uroscopy, the practice became an established part of medical evaluation from Babylon to Byzantium. Doctors observed color, clarity, sediment, and even scent, all without the benefit of microscopes. By the 10th century, Byzantine and Islamic medical manuals included color charts depicting various shades of urine, from pale straw to deep reddish-brown, each correlated with specific ailments. A glass flask, medulla, became the physician's primary diagnostic tool. Medieval doctors, dressed in their scholarly robes, might carry a patient's urine across town in such a flask, holding it up to light at various angles, swishing it gently to observe cloudiness, and sniffing it discreetly. It was not superstition. It was the best diagnostic method available before blood tests or thermometers. Urine, after all, was produced by the body's inner workings. If something was amiss inside, it would leave traces outside. Some scholars describe this process poetically as a window into the soul. The golden water speaks. Perfumes and potions. While the use of urine in science and medicine is often discussed, its role in cosmetics and perfumes is a lesser-known but fascinating chapter. In Renaissance Europe, perfumers sought long-lasting, penetrating scents. One of their prized ingredients was ambergris, a waxy substance produced in the intestines of sperm whales. But equally prized, if less expensive, were ammonia-based fixatives derived from urine. Stale urine, allowed to ferment for weeks, would release ammonia, a natural preservative and scent binder. When combined with herbal extracts, floral oils, or resins, it helped prolong the perfume's potency and absorption into fabrics and skin. In certain cosmetic recipes, aged urine was even used to remove freckles or soften skin. Some beauty manuals from the 1500s advised washing the face with morning water, meaning the first urine passed after waking, diluted with rosewater or milk. This was not merely folklore. The ammoniacal compounds in aged urine could have mild exfoliating and antiseptic effects, even if the method feels shocking by modern standards. Thus, the same substance feared for its smell could, paradoxically, help preserve pleasant scents. Another contradiction that would delight any alchemist. The urine wheel. Perhaps one of the most iconic medieval representations of urine's medical role is the urine wheel, a visual chart that linked urine color and consistency with disease diagnoses. Each segment of the wheel showed a flask filled with differently tinted liquid, sometimes lemon yellow, sometimes greenish, occasionally black or red. Accompanying notes suggested possible interpretations: bilious fever, melancholic imbalance, wasting disease, pregnancy. The wheel was used by physicians and medical students alike. And while many of its conclusions were inaccurate by today's standards, the underlying approach, observation, categorization, hypothesis, was deeply scientific. In fact, it mirrors the earliest steps of the scientific method. These wheels, often illustrated by hand and passed down through generations, served as reminders of the body's silent language. And they placed urine, again, at the heart of human inquiry. Sacred waste, religious symbolism and taboo. Urine's dual nature, sacred and shameful, made it a powerful symbol in religious contexts as well. In some ascetic sects, particularly in ancient India, urine was embraced as a form of purity through renunciation. Certain yogic traditions believed that drinking one's own urine, a practice called amoroli, could cleanse the body and spirit. This was never mainstream, but it was part of a broader philosophy that sought transcendence through control over the body. Elsewhere, in Judeo-Christian contexts, urine became a marker of impurity and humility. In some medieval monastic orders, rules around relieving oneself were strict and ritualized. And yet, monks also used urine-soaked cloths for cleaning manuscripts or purifying parchment, highlighting a practical dimension that coexisted with moral caution. The Bible, too, makes veiled references to urination. Often euphemistically, such as the Hebrew phrase, "he who urinates against the wall," used to describe men in moments of judgment or disgrace. Thus, urine was ever present in the spiritual imagination, forbidden yet useful, base yet revealing. The alchemical urine of animals. It was not only human urine that attracted attention. In agrarian and pastoral cultures, the urine of cows, horses, and camels held special status. In India, gomutra, cow urine, was regarded as purifying and is still used today in Ayurvedic practices. It was collected, filtered, and mixed with herbs or milk in various rituals. In 10th century Arabic texts, camel urine was cited as a cure for digestive ailments and skin conditions. Some Bedouin traditions used it to treat infections or even clean wounds in the absence of water. Alchemists experimented with these animal urines as well, noting their differing behaviors. Horse urine, for instance, was more acidic and thus more reactive in certain chemical preparations. In a world where knowledge came from careful watching and testing, not from sterile laboratories, these differences were meaningful. The alchemist did not dismiss the world's offerings. He examined each creature's gift, no matter how humble, for clues to the grand design. Transmutation and the human body. At its heart, alchemy was about transformation. Not just of lead to gold, but of sickness to health, ignorance to knowledge, base matter to divine substance. The body, messy, flawed, mortal, was both laboratory and subject. Urine, then, was more than a material. It was evidence that the body changed, that something left it, that internal processes were visible in this pale stream, that waste itself might be a key to understanding life. Even today, long after the alembics and the flasks have been replaced by test tubes and centrifuges, modern biochemistry carries this same spirit. Urinalysis remains a core tool in medicine. We search for proteins, sugars, hormones, signs of pregnancy, disease, balance. We do not call it alchemy now. But the impulse is the same. A currency beyond coins. From ancient markets to imperial courts, trade and economy were often imagined through the language of gold and silver. But alongside these glittering standards existed another, humbler currency, a waste. Not waste in the sense of discard, but in the older sense of transformation. Urine was a resource, yes, but in many communities, it was also a form of exchange. Among the most enigmatic goals of medieval alchemists was the creation of aurum potabile, or drinkable gold, a liquid elixir believed to grant longevity, cure disease, and elevate the soul. And remarkably, some alchemists turned to urine in their pursuit of it. Paracelsus, the Swiss physician-alchemist of the 16th century, believed that true medicine must be derived from nature's existing materials, no matter how humble. He and his followers theorized that urine, containing the salts of life, could be refined into a potent distillate. In dense treatises, these alchemists described complex processes involving the collection of urine, fermentation in glass vessels, distillation through curvaceous retorts, and the final emergence of a golden tincture shimmering like the sun. Though their exact recipes varied, the belief remained that within waste lay wisdom. To modern scientists, the idea of drinkable gold might seem absurd. But in its time, it represented the convergence of symbolic reasoning and early chemistry. Urine contained urea, ammonia, salts, and organic compounds, substances which did indeed undergo fascinating transformations when distilled and crystallized. Alchemists, without knowing these compounds by modern names, worked from color, scent, and behavior. And to their astonishment, the spirit of urine could yield bright crystals, sharp vapors, and luminous residues. No wonder they believed it magical. Sanitation, city life, and the economy of urine. As cities expanded in the late Middle Ages and early modern period, the management of human waste became a pressing issue not only for public health but also for commerce. In cities like Paris, Florence, and London, urine became part of a regulated economy. Chamber pots were not merely emptied into the gutter, in many cases, they were collected by piss collectors, a real profession, who transported the urine to tanneries, fulling mills, or dye houses. The demand was high. Tanneries used urine to soften hides and remove hair. Fulling mills used it to treat wool and cloth. Dyers used it to fix colors and enhance vibrancy. In industrial districts, the sharp scent of ammonia permeated the air, a sign of productivity. Authorities often taxed or regulated these trades. In some cities, residents were paid a small fee for contributing their urine to communal cisterns, which were then auctioned to the highest bidder among craftsmen. Thus, bodily waste became civic resource. The body fed the economy. What once was shame became coin. It's difficult to overstate how ubiquitous this practice was. Entire neighborhoods functioned around the chemistry of excretion. Behind the grandeur of Gothic cathedrals and Renaissance courts lay an invisible river of golden liquid, linking home, industry, and science. Literary urine, from satire to symbol. Writers of the medieval and Renaissance periods were not blind to urine's symbolic potential. It appeared in satire, religious allegory, and even romance. In Rabelais' Gargantua and Pantagruel, the giant Pantagruel urinates so forcefully that he creates a new river, washing away his enemies. The scene is absurd, grotesque, and comic, but also layered with critique about power and excess. Shakespeare, too, referenced urine obliquely. In Henry IV, Falstaff jokes about drinking down yellow, and in Othello, ego plants hints about soiled linens and bedsheets. These were not accidental. The Elizabethan audience understood the hidden language of such allusions. In religious writing, urine was used to contrast bodily humility with divine grace. Saints' lives occasionally described ascetics who rejected cleanliness as vanity, embracing the odor of the body as proof of devotion. Yet even here, waste became a signifier of distance from the world, of proximity to the divine. Later poets, such as Jonathan Swift, pushed the boundary even further. In his poem The Lady's Dressing Room, Swift mocks the illusion of feminine beauty by cataloguing the filth found in a woman's private chamber, including chamber pots. The poem scandalized readers, but also reflected growing awareness of the body as both theatre and reality. In all these texts, urine appears not as background but as metaphor, fluid, liminal, revealing. Urine in warfare and strategy. Even in the brutal arena of war, urine found unexpected uses. In the 15th and 16th centuries, soldiers were advised to carry cloth soaked in stale urine to protect against gunpowder burns and chemical irritants. The ammonia could neutralize acids from primitive explosives or calm inflamed wounds. During sieges, defenders sometimes collected urine and feces in large vats, mixing them with quicklime to create stink bombs, early forms of chemical deterrents. When hurled at enemies or funneled through pipes, the combination produced choking fumes that forced attackers to retreat or delay. There are records from the Siege of Vienna and the wars of the Italian city-states that mention such tactics, often in the form of marginalia, short notes scrawled in the corners of military manuals, not fit for polite summary but essential for survival. In Arctic expeditions centuries later, explorers learned to thaw frozen locks and tools using warm urine, an improvisation born of necessity. Hunters in Siberia used reindeer urine to mask their scent when stalking prey. In labs around the world, golden flasks are replaced by sterile plastic cups, but the principle remains unchanged. The color wheel of medieval physicians now takes digital form. The ancient uroscopy charts have given way to algorithms. Yet when a doctor studies a urinalysis report, they are still asking the same question that a monk or an alchemist once asked. What is happening inside this person? In modern metaphors, we speak of reading the body. But bodies do not write books. They excrete. And urine, despite all our cultural distancing, remains one of the most eloquent texts of all. The Last Alchemists. In the dusty corners of old libraries, one might still find scrolls or leather-bound volumes that smell faintly of ammonia. Not by accident. Urine was used in parchment making. Many monastic scribes softened calfskin pages using aged urine, making them supple for ink. Thus, even as they copied holy texts, psalms, gospels, philosophy, they worked atop a surface prepared by waste. Every letter of wisdom, every illuminated capital, rested upon a foundation of transformed refuse. The alchemist, then, was not alone. Every monk, every artisan, every doctor who touched the yellow stream engaged in a form of quiet transmutation. Even today, historians and chemists examining ancient inks and papers must contend with these traces. Urine, it turns out, is a preservative. The same substance we flush away has held history in place for centuries. And so, we come to the close of our unusual, unexpected journey, a story not about kings or conquests, but about something far humbler. Something golden, pungent, quietly powerful, and universally human. Urine. Across the winding centuries, through stone alleys and thatched roofs, from the vats of Roman laundries to the looms of Japanese silk workers, this simple bodily byproduct has left its mark, not with a flourish, but with a quiet persistence. It was gathered at dawn, stirred at dusk, traded in buckets, and used with care. It shaped economies, rituals, and rhythms of life that we've mostly forgotten, and maybe, in forgetting, lost something precious. Not because urine is sacred, but because the people who worked with it, who labored in silence, who passed down recipes, who learned through stains and smells and seasons, understood something deeper. They saw use in what others dismissed. They found continuity in waste. They practiced an ancient, intuitive kind of science, of observation, of pattern, of patience. And perhaps that is the true heart of this story. It's not about the urine. It's about value. About seeing worth where others see dirt. About remembering that the everyday, the smelly, the strange, the overlooked, often holds more power than the polished and the praised. That history lives in the hands of the anonymous. The washer. The weaver. The girl with the bucket. The monk with the flask. The elder who knew when the vat was ready simply by scent. Let us walk once more, slowly and gently, across this story's many paths. The forgotten knowledge of the humble craftspeople. Think of the dyer. She stands barefoot in a stone-walled workshop, her hand stained the deep blue of woad. Around her, great clay jars bubble gently, filled with a mixture of stale urine, plant dye, and time. She has no formal education, no library of chemistry. But she knows exactly when the mixture is ready, when the scent is sharp enough, when the bubbles change shape, when the silk she dips flashes green before turning blue. She has no diploma, yet she holds generations of knowledge. In this way, the story of urine is also the story of folk wisdom, of the kind of science practiced not in labs but in fields and kitchens. It is a story of tactile memory, of inherited practice. Of precision born not from textbooks but from routine, experience, and reverence. The washerwoman, the potash maker, the wool carder, they weren't just laborious. They were technologists. Quiet alchemists of the everyday. When we dismiss what they used, we risk dismissing who they were. The cycles of use, waste as resource. Imagine a medieval village before dawn. A soft light glows from a single window. Inside, an old woman lifts a ceramic pot, heavy with the contents of the night. She walks slowly to the garden, not to throw it away, but to pour it into a waiting barrel. Later, this barrel will be stirred, thickened with wood ash, and used to clean the family's wool garments. Nothing is wasted. Chickens peck at the compost heap. Soap is made from fat and lye. Rainwater is saved in barrels. Broken tools are repaired, not replaced. And the contents of the chamber pot are not discarded in shame, but repurposed with purpose. Modern eyes might recoil. But to them, it was wisdom. This was not merely an economic necessity, it was a worldview. A rhythm of life in which every part of the body, every drop of liquid, every scrap of matter had potential. This was sustainability not as trend, but as truth. In that world, urine was not a nuisance. It was a tool. A silent language of smell. There's something deeply intimate about smell. We recoil from it, we joke about it, we mask it with perfumes. But in the pre-modern world, scent was a form of communication. To the trained fuller or cloth dyer, the scent of urine was a guide. Sharpness meant fermentation. A sulfurous note could indicate the presence of certain bacteria. A change in smell could signify that the mixture had gone too long without stirring. In this way, the nose became a tool. A gauge. A barometer of invisible change. Even physicians learned this. Uroscopy, once dismissed as pseudoscience, was rooted in close sensory observation. Doctors smelled, tasted, and compared the color of urine to detailed charts. They weren't always correct, but they were practicing empirical observation centuries before the microscope. Scent, it turns out, was a kind of science. What we lost in the flush. In the modern world, we press a button and it all disappears. Clean. Efficient. Hygienic. But in doing so, we've perhaps flushed away something else. A connection to the body. A rhythm of use and reuse. A reverence for the strange alchemy of nature. A recognition that what leaves us can still serve us. It's not that we should return to using urine in our homes. But maybe we should look again at what we throw away. At what we dismiss. At what seems unworthy of a second glance. Because sometimes, the waste of today was the wisdom of yesterday. Final thoughts. If history teaches us anything, it is that greatness often hides in plain sight. Not in marble halls or royal thrones, but in the steaming vat, the wooden bucket, the stained apron. In the quiet work of those who lived without fame, but with immense understanding. Urine was just one of their tools. but their true power was in seeing the world not as waste and worth, but as one seamless, usable whole. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, think not of the golden fluid itself, but of the golden thread it represents. The thread of hidden wisdom, of everyday magic, of people who turned the simplest things into the most enduring legacies. Good night.